This is Steven, this is SC Guitars, and this is the very first build video for the Great Guitar Build Off 2021. In this very first video of the build, what we shall be doing is using epoxy. We'll be playing around with LEDs, we'll be removing a fretboard, hopefully successfully, gluing on a new one, all sorts of crazy stuff. In terms of updates since the last video, I now have a bit more lighting in here, so I've got lights here and here, so you can see my beautiful face a bit easier and I can hopefully see what I'm doing. I have brand new woodworking bench that actually has proper vices that haven't just been glued onto the table, so this will be a far more stable surface for me to pick up this guitar this year. Before we get cracking with the build, we will discuss a bit further of what I had planned, just because I was a bit elusive about it in the first sort of piss take video. So now we are up close and personal with the build. By the power of the post edit, I have went ahead and hidden the headstock design because I'm going to be just a bit more of a dick and not unveil that just yet. As I said before, it probably will be one of the most risky bits of the build that I will break. The proposed idea for this build, it will be heavily influenced on the guitar that I was trying to build for last year's competition, which I completely destroyed at the last hurdle. So it is based off the Fender Stratosonic, which till this day I still believe is one of the most beautiful guitars that not very many people know about. As it is based heavily on last year's build, there are quite a few things that I learned from last year that I will hopefully replicate successfully this year, so that will hopefully mean I shall be a little less stressed. What I'm doing this year is we are going to be harnessing the power of black holes themselves with Stuart Simple's Black 3.0 paint, which is the blackest paint that you can buy on the market.
Probably.
Now, if you don't know who Stuart Simple is, he pretty much is the love child between Professor Brian Cox and Noel Fielding. It is weird, but it's just true. Now, he pretty much runs a company that tries to make cool and innovative paints like Black 3.0. They have like the blackest black, they have the chromiest chrome, pinkest pink, reddest red, the list goes on. Ever since seeing his Black 3.0 paint, I've pretty much become obsessed with just how we can implement that in a guitar. So I have seen a few people do it on YouTube, but if I'm honest, I haven't seen them do it well. The only sort of example I've really seen is just a guy take a normal acoustic guitar and just paint over the whole thing. So the body, the headstock, the neck, the fretboard of this really fragile paint that chips away like my hopes and dreams. So what we'll hopefully be doing is doing the first sort of start to finish build using Black 3.0, and we're gonna try to make things as interesting as possible. So pretty much the whole body will be covered in the stuff. There'll be a few other paints and stuff that I will include just to make it duff. Okay, so we have the body here on our brand new desk. If you don't know what I'm working with, you can go back to the first video, which you can find here, and I pretty much do an unboxing of the kit and sort of a rundown of things from there. But if you have watched it, you will know that this is a cheap ash body kit from Gear for Music. Because I'm going for a Stratosonic design, all the usual Stratocaster routing is absolutely no use to me. So we shall be going in and filling this all with epoxy, pretty much just to get it back to a solid slab. And then from there, we shall be able to do the likes of the routing. Because I don't have toothpicks, we shall have to drill these up to 3mm for the scratch plate holes, and then we shall go ahead and stick these in with just a bit of super glue. Obviously, I could go ahead and just fill in with epoxy, just in holes, but this is probably just the best way to make sure all those holes are filled. Now there is one hole that would cause a bit of an issue just because it is very close to the end of the jack cavity. So what we'll do, we'll go back and we'll do something differently with that just after we get all the other sticks glued in place. So fret end snippers and fret hammer will make light work of this. My cap has run away. So just a bit of glue. Okay, so now hopefully I don't knock over my camera. This has started to cure, so I can go ahead and cut these a bit closer to the ends. So I ran out of storage there, so I completely cut most of the process off. Good start to the competition. Pretty much what I'd just done there is I hammered them all into place and cut off the tops just using the fret end snippers. So we are still a bit proud, so we're just going to go in with a chisel and get the rest off of them just so they are flush with the body. Okay, so on reflection, I realized there was a hole that I missed along with some in the body. As well as last, there is also the ones on the trim cover which I completely missed, so I just went ahead and filled them in the exact same way just to save you the bore of having to watch it. I just went over with 400 grit sandpaper just to make sure they are fairly flush. At the moment, I'm not overly worried about perfect sanding just because I need to do the rest of the body, and we'll probably come back to that after doing the first coat of epoxy. Now, in terms of the hole that we missed, just because it was very close to the cavity, I probably could have done it anyway because it's going to be epoxied over, so it probably won't be that much of an issue, even if it did chip away and cause some tear out into the cavity. But we also have to go ahead and cover up the holes for the neck. Firstly, because they are completely out of line. They are not square whatsoever. And also because they're not actually the right size, they are smaller than the actual screw. So we might as well just fill those in. So what I'm going to do, I shall be using some epoxy putty first of all before we cover the whole thing in actual liquid epoxy resin. So I'm going to just fill it in there as well as using it in the neck as well. And then I'm not really worried about giving it time to dry. It will dry much the same with the actual epoxy resin over it. So we'll fill those in quickly and then we shall go ahead and paint the body with some epoxy. Now, being the humble man that I am, I have opted to get the small gloves despite having fairly large hands. So this might be an uncomfortable minute trying to get these on. Now, this is epoxy putty that I got for another project which I haven't finished, so it is currently stuck to the box. So it is currently very, very gross and old and hard and delightful, but it should work much the same. So essentially for this it is 1-to-1, so we shall grab some now and we shall get rolling. That is a literal solid turd. So now I don't really want to touch the camera with my epoxy hands, but all we just need to do now is go ahead and fill in these holes just with the epoxy. So it should be fairly well mixed now. Now it will stand a bit proud, I imagine, but once it starts to cure and starts to harden, we can just go back in with the chisel just in a similar way as we've done these and take the top off. To be honest, I don't know if I'll actually be able to get this thin enough to fit down here. Oh, life would be so much easier if I had just bought toothpicks. There we go. Like I said, I'm not going to be too precious about it. That is fairly flush, so that's fine. We shall now just flip it over and we shall do the same for the neck pockets. What I want to do here is, I could have just probably done it with some wood in a similar way. We're just going to plug it from one side, because what we'll probably do is go back in with the epoxy and then flood it in from the other side. So this is essentially just to make sure it doesn't seep out. We might as well fill in the holes on where the tram would be stuck into. Now, the reason we had that blue slippy tape on the desk, which was causing an absolute nightmare once doing all that gluing and chiseling, is that it is epoxy proof, apparently as advertised. So what we're going to do is we're essentially just going to paint the whole body just in a bit of epoxy resin just to seal it with the black 3.0 in order for you to get a nice flat finish, and in order for it to essentially get as black as possible, you do need to do it on a sealed surface. Obviously it is acrylic based paint, so it will seep into the wood. So we're just going to do one initial coat of epoxy now. We'll let that cure overnight because it's just essentially a surface level. Just a quick splash in the body. It shouldn't take too long to dry, but apparently it has quoted 24 hours on the box, but it should be a bit quicker than that. So what we'll do, we shall grab some epoxy from our shelf of many things and we shall mix them together now and get started on some actual fun stuff for this kit. We have our resin here now, and because I eat about 50,000 jellies, we have some jelly pots here which we are going to mix the epoxy in. Now with all epoxies, it does need to be about 21 to 25 degrees Celsius, so I do have a water bath here that has cooled down substantially since trying to copy across all my files. So what we'll do is, it's 1-to-1, so we'll just mix them. We shouldn't need all that much just because we're doing a light sort of, almost like a light paint coat, so we shall mix them here. We have the water bath here, which we'll just pop a pot into to warm it up a bit, and then we'll just stir it with our stirring stick. And I have my trusty thermometer here that I use for the Snake's Vivarium. Snake cameo appearing now. And yeah, so let's get cracking. So what I should be doing is wearing my respirator, which I took off. So if I sound a bit like Bane, I apologize. So it is 1-to-1. I am just going to eyeball it here, just against the pot. So, tragedy has befallen me this early into the competition. So despite that very, very cool montage that you've just witnessed with your eyeballs, my resin has not entirely cured. As you'll see, a lot of the parts have cured, but for the rest of it, if I go in with my nail, it is still relatively soft and will leave an indentation. So pretty much what that means is I fucked up. There are a few reasons that this could have went wrong. More than likely it was due to the temperature in here. This is not a heated room, so the temperature does drop quite cold, especially sort of late winter, early spring. So that more than likely has caused an impact, because this resin says it works best sort of between 21 to 24 degrees Celsius, which I don't think it's ever reached in this room. Secondly, another very likely issue is my eyeball judgment is not as reliable as it may have seemed at the time. So what we'll do, I suppose, we'll go and do it properly. I have a small set of scales here which should be perfect for the job, so that will make sure that we are definitely in 1-to-1 ratio. The third issue, there quite possibly may have been bits of matter jelly still in that container, which I don't know if anyone's done the science behind it, but I don't think jelly and resin are really meant to mix. What we will do off camera, both for your sake and mine, because I do not want to edit that, is we're going to retry the resin. I'm going to partially fill the cavities just because it doesn't really say with this resin how much I can pour at once, so I don't want to pour too much and then for that also not to cure. So we'll do that. I'm also going to test the epoxy tape at the back of the body. Obviously I need to fill this cavity as well, so we've taped that off. I'm going to pour some through the trim cavity and we shall see if that sits nicely on the back or if that's going to cause any issues. We now have success. Okay, so it is about 36 hours later. We have left the epoxy a bit longer than the 24 hours advertised, just because it did just seem still a bit soft after 24 hours. But what would you know, following the instructions means that it actually works. So we only filled the cavity a tiny bit just to test it out, but as you can see, it is absolutely rock solid. If I drag my nail across it, it isn't really causing any marks whatsoever. So that was a success. If we flip it over to the back though, that's where it's most interesting. So the tape, which I was a bit skeptical about, has held, and we have essentially filled the back of the trim cavity flat. There are a few divots just where the tape was, but that'll be fixed once we put the last final coat of epoxy over. So what we shall do is we shall just go ahead and mix all the epoxy we have. I have a feeling that the 100 milliliters that I've purchased will not be enough, so we might need to go out and get some more, but I shall essentially mix as much as I can now, fill in the rest of the trim cavity just so it's flat with the body. I shall try to fill in as much of the pickup routing as we can do, and we'll meet back then. Hello, this is future Stephen. Now, hindsight is a fine thing.
A fine thing indeed.
And in that hindsight, I discovered that the mass of content that I promised for this video, filling in the body with epoxy, removing the fretboard, building the new fretboard, gluing that on, and the $500,000 things that I promised, was far too much for this one video. What that means is there will be a lot more videos going live on this channel over the coming months. There will be a lot more frequent videos going live on this channel over the coming months. I will be less stressed having to condense thousands of hours of content into 6 tiny videos. Now, just an idea of where we are ending this video. We have the body all filled in with epoxy on the front and the back. That is including the screw holes and the trim cover. Now, it is fairly flat, but there are still a few divots that need to be fixed. There's actually a chunk that's came out there. I don't know how that's happened, but I obviously dropped something on it, so that needs filled in now. As we're stopping at this point, there are hours of content that I've filmed that I can now throw at you now to show you what we will be doing in the very next video. So we shall be removing frets, we will be gradually filing away at that fretboard, we will be drawing some circles and then drawing them 62 other times once we're not happy with how they turned out. So It will be an interesting video. We will finally get a look at that planetoid fretboard in all its glory with epoxy and LEDs. I have recently came up with a fantastic drilling solution to make sure it is all straight and flush and fantastic. So expectations. Please go ahead and subscribe to the channel, hitting the bell icon so you are up to date once those videos are released and you're notified. If you enjoyed the video, then by all means go ahead and hit that like button. If you hated the video or you're just an all-round dick, then just dislike it. I don't even care. Until then, I shall continue building and I shall continue being stressed. Thank you and good night. P.S. Ben, I uploaded this video by Monday, so I don't owe you a drink.